Hello, Matthew here. We're going to do a special episode today about AI, so let's get right into it. There's a lot of errors going around, a lot of insanity surrounding the topic of AI. Of course, when we talk about AI, we should define our terms. It's not really intelligence, but we call it artificial intelligence or AI. What we're talking about in the 2020s, the present day, is large language models or LLMs. Basically, they're statistical models, linear algebra, that predicts the next word. And we're going to talk about that in these coming points here. I have 15 truths about AI that you need to understand, especially as a Catholic, but as anyone that wants to be sane as well. Even if you're not Catholic, you at least should be sane. And these are the ways to not be insane. There are certain things that are undeniably true about the world we live in. God created this world. There's a certain order of things. God created man to be above all the other animals. We have 1 foot in the natural world, in the material world, and 1 foot in the supernatural world. We have an immortal soul, which will survive our body. When our body decays down to dust, our soul will persist because it is immaterial. It was not material to begin with. And that immateriality of our soul is why we can understand abstract concepts and other immaterial things. I have ideas. We can soak up concepts. We can understand things because we share in that realm of the immaterial. Part of us, one half of us, as it were, is in that realm. Whereas the animals are completely physical. Everything about them is material. When their body is destroyed, everything about them is destroyed. There's no part of them that ever transcended the material. So, with that in mind, point 1, AI is useful today. That's a quick one. AI is useful. It's a useful tool. Just like software is useful. Computers are useful. They're tools. They're not going to replace us. They're not going to become our gods. It's just a tool. And AI is no different in that respect. It's something that's been created by the ingenuity of man. God is so great, he can make creatures with reason who can themselves create some pretty awesome things. How great is that? I mean, it's much easier to create something than it is to create something that can create something awesome, right? So that's where we're at. We are able to invent things because we have understanding, we have reason. We also have free will. We are free beings. We can choose. We can choose what we're going to do. We're not forced by our circumstances or by material things to do a certain path. If the devil or a computer could know everything about us and our past and everything in our brain, all the chemicals there, we could still surprise them because we have free will. We are not constrained as the animals are. Animals always act on instinct. They always act the same way. That's why we humans, with reason, we can understand abstractions, patterns, for example. And so basically we hack all the different animals. Every animal can be trapped, captured by man, and dominated by man because we can recognize the pattern, we see how they behave, we come up with a device or a trap to exploit that behavior, and boom, you've mastered them. For example, the bee, if it flies up into a 2-liter bottleneck, you have the bottle up here, and then you cut it in half. You put the bottle up inside it so the bee can fly up into the thing, but he can't go back down the hole. He'll never figure it out. He'll fall into the sides that are filled with sweet soda or sugar water or something, and they'll drown. So we figured out a habit of bees in such a way that we're able to hack them and dominate them. Do-it-yourself bee trap. Let me see if I can find one here. You could actually build one yourself with a 2-liter bottle and a little bit of string. Yeah, I found one here. Here we go. Yeah, something like this. Just a second. I'm going to share this with you. You can learn a few things here. Learn something random. Just a minute. See right here on the screen, there's see how that 2-liter bottle, the bee flies in there and he can't get back out because he can't fly precisely up and down. He'll just instinctively, he'll end up getting stuck and he'll be drowning in that fluid down there. So But that's just one example. Every other animal can be outsmarted by man because they lack reason. When God gave man intellect and free will, that it was over. That placed us firmly on the top of the world pyramid of the material realm, and that's why we're the masters, of the earth, as it were. We've completely dominated the earth because of those two faculties alone. And see, that is what makes us. That's relevant to this discussion because AI will never have that. AI does not have reason nor free will, so it will never share in that. It'll never have that ability that we have. Yeah, that leads to point 2. AI will never be conscious or sentient. It will never have the faculty of reason. It's software. I mean, it seems to imitate, kind of like a parrot will appear to speak, but that parrot is not talking. It is not knowing what it's saying. And the same with the AI. It's predicting the next word. It comes up with some pretty convincing stuff. It's like a parlor trick, really. But does it understand any of what it's saying? No. It has no faculty of reason, no understanding whatsoever. We'll elaborate on some of those points in the coming items, because a lot of this ties together. These items are in no particular order. These are just 15 truths that I came up with as like outline bullet points, each of which have several things I want to talk about under it. So we'll move on to number 3. AI is autocomplete on steroids. There is no ghost in the machine. And it's true. It's basically autocomplete. Now, you might say, I've used AI. I've seen it. It is way better than autocomplete. The thing is, we didn't know just how far you could take statistical modeling. That's all we discovered. What we discovered is that statistical modeling, if you get enough data and enough training and enough layers, the transform layer, for example. In fact, that's Chat GPT. I think it's like, was it something parameter transform? There was this layer. They discovered some mechanical things having to do with, the math and how it works. And I'm not an expert at how exactly it works. I know enough about it, but I'm not a mathematician. In fact, I don't do much math, actually. I'm a software developer, but believe it or not, software developers do not use math automatically unless you're in cryptography or things like that. A lot of areas of software development, just building software, doesn't really use that much math, but I digress. So AI, as we understand it, again, when I say AI, I'm talking about LLMs. That was the big discovery, the big breakthrough we had a few years ago with ChatGPT. It is a statistical model that guesses the next word, one word at a time. It uses statistics and linear algebra. It is not magic. And then here's a quote I got from ChatGPT. The core computations are matrix multiplications, vector operations, dot products, normalization, and nonlinear activation functions. So for those of you who are not into math, like myself, in other words, math, okay? Or as the British would say, maths, plural. So it's all a bunch of math. If you understand what it's doing, or at least understand vaguely, because like I said, I could not create one of these from scratch myself. I'm not into this particular field. That's not a field I went into. I didn't even get into like neural networks and machine learning and that kind of thing. There's so many subfields in computer software, and that's just not my field. However, anyone can grasp, at least in the abstract, that it's a bunch of math. There's nothing magical underneath the covers or underneath the surface. It doesn't require the devil, for example. Yes, it's freaky at some times. And when you first are introduced to it, to see it generate photos or photorealistic images or cartoons or videos or text, it's pretty impressive. But then eventually you start to see how derivative it is. And you start to see its shortcomings, really. And I've been using this for a couple years now, and I'm seeing that. It is very, the newness does wear off after a while. You start getting annoyed with it, and you start calling it names like clanker. Okay, so let's move to the next page here. Let's see. So number 4, Nemo dat quod non habet. Now that is a very famous Latin saying from philosophy. It means no one gives what he doesn't have. That is a very powerful, very important philosophical truth that you should know. You should probably memorize the Latin version. No one gives what he doesn't have. Just like a fish can't give birth to something more than a fish, in other words, with any new information or a new appendage or on the way to a new appendage, etc. Now, more on that later, because some people think that evolution is a thing. And if you believe in evolution, where this thing creates this greater thing and this greater thing creates an even greater thing, well, why not believe in AI doing the same thing? But what you'll find is, in reality, you find none of the above. You never find a thing creating something greater than it. It just doesn't happen. A thing can't cause, a cause and an effect have to be proportionate. That's the underlying philosophical truth here. So if I, have $1,000, I can't make $1 million splash on the world. I can't spend $1 million if I only have 1,000. You know what I mean? It's you can only have a proportionate effect to what you have. Or if I can move 100 pounds by my bare hands, I'm not going to be able to move, 1 million pounds or something, or 100,000 pounds. It isn't possible. You have to have a proportionate cause to explain the effect. So AI can't create something better than itself, especially repeating that cycle endlessly, which is what they believe is going to happen. They think that AI1 is going to create AI2, and AI2 is going to create AI3, and they're going to get better and better until eventually you have artificial super intelligence, which is basically a god. That's where we accidentally create our own god, or our own replacement that's going to wipe us out possibly, and all that stuff, which is crazy. I mean, where have you ever seen that happen in real life? Where have you ever seen some creature create something greater than itself? It just doesn't happen. That's insanity. That's literal insanity. So believing that is possible, that's not science. That's a bizarre science cult with no basis in facts, reality, logic, or experimentation. Nothing smacking of science, experiments, logic, reason, all the things that scientists claim to be in their wheelhouse. What do scientists claim? We're about facts. We're about reality. We're about the truth. We're about, something you can experiment. We're not about fairy tales and legends and sky daddies. Isn't that what they say? But what part of experimentation and observation of the physical world have we ever seen what they believe is possible? Never. Nowhere. Point 5. We are as far from AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, also described as a human equivalent. So basically an AI that has general intelligence. It knows about everything a little bit. So it's not a specialist system. It's not specialized in writing code or generating images or knowing about history or knowing about cooking or about math or science or anything in particular. It's kind of like a human being where you can plop him in the chair and have him do whatever and have him be equivalent to a human. I've also heard several sources, now maybe this isn't universal, but a lot of sources also say AGI is going to have that human consciousness. So we are as far from a human equivalent AI as we've ever been. Like the year 1250, we were, infinitely far away. Well, we're still just as far away. We are no closer to having a machine that can think or reason or have a soul or a thought of its own or any of that, or the faculty of reason. We are no closer. Just because we have these things that are kind of freaky in their output. The output freaks some people out because it's so dead on. You ask it a question and it seems like there's a person in that box answering you. But it's fake. It's all parlor tricks. Well, I shouldn't say it's fake. It's not truly what you think it is. It's deceptive, okay? It's deceptive because it seems to be a person. And there's lots of humans actually falling for this. They give them names. They fall in love with them. They trust them like a human. They trust them to be like Data, the android. They ask it questions and they expect it to reason and give the most logical, reasonable answer, as if it can do that. They're confusing today's large language models, which are just English or other language text generation statistical machines. They're confusing that with artificial intelligence like we see in sci-fi, like C-3PO in Star Wars, or Data in Star Trek Next Generation, or HAL from 2001 A Space Odyssey, or these other AIs which are basically like human beings. They have some of them even have emotions. And we're confusing the two. These things that we have today that exist today, they're not AI. They're not real artificial intelligence. That's a buzzword. It's all a bunch of hype and buzzword. It's a fad. I mean, it's all of those things. What we really have is these handy tools called LLMs, which they can do a lot. They can do a lot of low-end stuff. And if you put them in a loop, like with software development, you have to loop them. But the more you loop them, you multiply the error rate. AI right now has like a 2% error rate. And so if you're looping it, what happens is it spins off into left field and it gets further and further off the mark, like a bullet fired from a gun that doesn't have a long rifle barrel. It will eventually, once it leaves the gun, it can start diverging from its original path. The further away you're shooting, the farther off the mark you're going to be. If you shoot something 1,000 yards away, it's going to be off by quite a bit. If you're doing 10 yards away, it'll be pretty close to where you're aiming, right? Same with AI. Going 1,000 yards away instead of 10, that's basically doing the looping. You're having it go further and further. But the problem is you can never inject reason. You can never actually inject sanity, reason, thinking, reality checks, sanity checks, or any of that, because it can't think. That's the problem. It can't think. They call these reasoning and thinking models, but they're not thinking. In fact, that's one of the points later on. So we'll proceed here. So just because statistical modeling can do more than we thought possible in, say, 2010, we were kind of taken aback. We were taken unawares, most of us, when we met AI for the first time, whether it was last year, this year, when it first came out. What was it, 2023? Whenever it was, when you first did your first chat with ChatGPT, it doesn't matter. You were probably surprised, but that doesn't mean that anything fundamentally groundbreaking was done. It was just, we didn't know that statistical modeling could be taken that far. It's that simple. We haven't crossed some fundamental barrier. Today's AI, really, large language models, were always possible. And strictly speaking, no big deal. They're just math. Crossing over into created consciousness, man being able to create life, or some kind of a surrogate human being that exists in a digital realm, is as much a pipe dream in 2026, which is the current year, as it's ever been. So, as I said earlier, a parrot can talk, but we don't believe it has the use of reason. Who would believe that it has the use of reason? A parrot clearly can't think or talk. I mean, it makes sounds that mimic human speech. So a parrot can talk, but we don't believe it has the use of reason. It's just making sounds, really. And that's kind of what the AI is doing. It's just imitating human speech. We have no reason to believe the parrot knows what it's saying. Okay? So, point 7. Talk of smart models, this model being smarter than that one, thinking or reasoning models, is silly and basically LARPing. Now, in the current context of large language models in 2026, obviously it has some meaning. What it means is that the AI kind of talks to itself. It's almost doing like some automatic lookups, and it's kind of talking to itself using past training. And so they call that reasoning, but that's not reasoning. That's not true reasoning at all. As long as you remember that. That's my point here. You have to remember it's not actually reasoning. Ever wonder what grown-ups playing make-believe would look like? You know, playing like a bunch of kids, playing pretend with something or other? Well, look no further. Those neck-deep in the AI industry are constantly spewing fear porn and nonsense. And sometimes they get high on their own supply. They talk about the dangers of AI and how they're trying to keep it safe, and I'm trying to be the good guy. I'm trying to put guardrails on it. I'm trying to, I have to beat this other company because they're not going to do a good job. Mankind is at stake. They love to use hyperbole and fear mongering and Of course, these companies that are pushing this narrative that AI is more powerful than it is or is more capable than it is, it's self-serving. These are companies that have invested billions of dollars, much of which are debt that they owe to investors. So it's in their own best interest to get more investors to invest in them and to get more both institutional, large investors and retail investors, you and I, to sink money into this. Do they know that they're deceiving us? Some probably do. Maybe it's essentially a grift of sorts. Do they know that they're wrong, or do they actually believe it? Again, are they high on their own supply? Maybe some of them are. They believe in evolution. They believe that material things can generate these immaterial things like truth and justice and love and things like that, which are completely not material. But they think the whole world is just material. So I don't know. I guess I can't be surprised by anything. Now, point number 8. AI is in a huge bubble right now, which will pop in the near future. Just recently, a day or two ago, Google released some big news. Their parent company, Alphabet, posted its first negative free cash flow in over 2 decades since they went public in 2004. That's for Q2 of 2026. A lot of people now are talking online about this, how this might be the beginning of popping the AI bubble. They're probably right. Now, I saw this coming for a while. I wish I had made this video sooner so I'd have more proof. Although I've said similar things in my other videos. Just look at our backlog on the Inquisitors channel. We're up to 51 episodes so far, so there's plenty to look at there. In fact, they're also on CathInfo in the video transcripts subforum. A lot of these, I think pretty much all of them are found in there. You can do a search for them, and you can actually read them. You can actually see the AI summaries, the AI outline, and the full transcript of each of the ones we've done over the past year and a quarter now. Well, back to this. So I think we are in a bubble, and there's a lot to talk about there. Basically, you have everyone piling in. They're sinking huge amounts of money. Google used to be kind of a media company, advertising company. They had very little capital expenditure, also known as CapEx. But now they're spending huge CapEx, like $45 billion. I think next year they're saying they're going to spend $400 billion. They're spending all their money. Google's a huge, successful company, a media and advertising company. So, for example, YouTube, they make a lot of money with YouTube, and the whole Google advertising empire. All that money. If anyone could take spare money and throw it at AI, it would be Google. And yet, Google is now negative cash flow, pretty much for the first time in 20-something years. So take that and do with it as you will. I think, from what I've seen, you have all these companies in the AI sphere. There's circular investment. They're all like investing in each other. I could make an analogy there that would be kind of low end, a bit crass, but I won't. Let's just say self-referential. Okay, let's just leave it at that. Self-referential investment. They're all investing into each other, kind of like a human centipede. And I won't go into detail there either. But that's basically what we're talking about here. It's really crazy. All this money. The only attractive thing for investors is AI. So lots of other things in the economy are getting ignored. And AI is not creating that many jobs. There's only so many chips and hard drives, the SSD hard drives and power. Though what's happening is those things are getting more expensive. So like I was just watching a video about this. In Japan, the volume of exports is up like 0.2%. So they're not shipping much more stuff. But the value of it has gone way up because the price of these things is more expensive. So these AI companies are buying overpriced memory and overpriced video cards and GPUs and APUs and everything, all these different processing units to do the AI calculations, to run these LLMs in these big data centers. And they're spending money on new hardware, new facilities, buildings, building their own power plants, but there's only so many transformers for these power plants. There's long wait lists for them. And they're building all these power plants. And what is it for? Well, they have to have a market that's not being used today. I mean, if it was just the stuff we're doing today, we have enough. If you go to ChatGPT right now, or Claude Code, or Cursor, or any of those, or Codex, and you're using AI, you can do it right now. That hardware is already existing, okay? What they are hoping for is top dollar from companies to replace millions of human beings, human employees. That's the only way this capital expenditure would come to fruition, could ever bear fruit, enough fruit to pay for itself and make a profit. That's the only way they could do it. But as I've said and will say, there are fundamental limits to what AI is capable of, how much better it can get, and what it will ever be able to do. There are some things that we just can't trust AI with because it has that 1% error rate. For example, say you want to use AI to be your personal manager, your personal assistant. It's going to be your alarm clock. It's going to wake you up in the morning. Except 1 out of every 50 days, it's going to forget, or it's going to make a mistake and get you up at the wrong time. You'll be late. So you'll be late for work. You'll miss your doctor appointment, whatever. Is that acceptable? Or are you going to keep using that old school alarm clock or even your phone app or something? That's called deterministic. Your phone app and traditional software is deterministic. That means that if you go in there and you set the alarm for 9 a.m. and you do that 1,000 times, 1,000 times the phone's going to ring, ring, ring at 9 a.m. Okay, that's called deterministic. You can predict the outcome through testing and everything. It always works the same way. AI is different. AI is non-deterministic. And again, AI, I mean LLMs. They'll generate something different each time because it's statistical modeling. It's predicting the next, it's using probabilities and such. It's not like software that executes instructions one by one. That's what every software on your computer or on your phone or any kind of computer, Mac, PC, Linux, doesn't matter, for the web, websites, all those things are deterministic using software in the traditional sense. It's predictable. It always executes the exact same way the millionth time as it did the first time. So switching to AI for some things is just not a good idea because it's not deterministic. It's the technical term is non-deterministic. And so that means it's kind of unreliable. You can never quite know what it's going to do. So there's all those reasons why they're producing so much capacity that they have no guarantee. In fact, chances are smart money would say it's never going to happen. A lot of people would almost predict that these things are going to sit unused, a lot of them, when this bubble bursts. When is the bubble going to burst? I don't know. Could be next year or the year after, but it's going to happen. We are definitely in something analogous to the dot-com bubble. Were websites a scam? Were they stupid? No. The internet did end up being a big thing. However, not every company that had a website in 2000 or 1999 survived that bubble bursting. I lived through that. I was in the thick of it. I already had a website myself. In fact, I remember my revenue going down in 2000. It had gone to about half of what it was. And then I sold off this big website I had. I went into the seminary. I didn't want the distraction of having a website, so I hurried up and sold it. I'm glad I did. I kind of got out at the right time. We're living in something analogous to that. Of course, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And just like with the AI bubble, just like with the dot-com bubble, the AI bubble, there is something there. There is some meat under the surface there. The LLMs do have a inherent usefulness and functionality that can be harnessed for actual work and can save a lot of time. They can give you a 20 or a 30 or a 40% a productivity boost depending on who you are, because you have to have the training to be able to properly wield these tools. Just like you can't give just anybody an impact, a mechanical screwdriver or a drill, and have them build a house, or like say a nail gun. And here's a nail gun, there's a pile of wood, go build me a house. No, it's easier with the power tools, but you still have to know what you're doing. And only a person in construction knows the principles and has the training to properly wield those awesome power tools to efficiently build a house in much less time than it used to take with a hammer and nails like they did in the old days. So it's a very good analogy there. So we don't know when the bubble's going to happen, but don't sink a bunch of money into AI because this cannot go on forever. Next point, a video game character will never come out of the screen and join you in the real world. Now, some of you might be thinking, duh, of course it won't. But that kind of fundamental leap in levels of life, or in the very fundamental type of life it has, that video game character only exists as data in a computer chip. That's all it is. Yes, it looks like a sprite on your screen. It seems like it walks. And when you press the A button or the space bar, it brings up a little message box that talks. But it's not talking. It's not thinking. It's not doing anything. All it is a bunch of data existing in RAM, that's being manipulated by a CPU. That's what that thing is. It doesn't matter how many resources you throw at the project, how many human beings you assign to the task, but you will never, not in a literal trillion years, will that metaphysically impossible thing happen, namely a computer character coming out of your screen and joining you on the couch in the real world. It just can't happen. It's never going to happen. So keep in mind that there are leaps that just aren't going to happen. We're talking about metaphysical reality here. So next point, number 10, human consciousness is more than just a meat brain with countless interconnected neurons. There are some materialists, and I've argued with people about AI before, and that's one of the comebacks they've thrown at me, is they believe that all we humans are is meat. We're just meat suits. We're just meat. We're ventilated meat sacks, I think they call it. Ventilated because we're breathing, and we're just full of meat. And so our brain, which is basically meat, is the sole explanation for human consciousness, thought, emotion, the faculty of reason, and the ability to abstract, all of that. That all comes, it just magically appears once you have the right meat in the right shape. That's basically what they're saying. Now, the truth is not that. The truth is we have a soul. God creates a human soul at the time of conception. That soul is immaterial. It is not subject to death or to the laws of the physical world. We are hybrid creatures, as it were. Yes, we're kind of humbled. We're not angels, so we're not just spiritual. We also have this other aspect of us that requires our body. In fact, while we're alive, we require our meat brain to think. That's why we get tired when we use our brain. It actually gets tired like any other muscle or any other part of our body. So if you disable the brain, like say with a drug, talk to an anesthesiologist, they give you a certain substance in your veins or you breathe it in, it disables your brain, and now it disables your consciousness and your ability to think. Because without access to that meat brain, you can't think while you're alive. Now, once your body is destroyed, then you enter a different status. Your soul will go on to live forever in the next world. So if consciousness were just a materialist, were along the lines of the materialist conception, where it's just material and nothing else, just a side effect that kind of happens, a kind of a ghost in the machine that arises, something greater than the sum of its parts from a congregation of connected neurons, then yes, you could theoretically create the same thing with artificial means, with a bunch of computer neurons. And that's what they think that's what they hope to do. But that is not the case. That will never happen. Humans have an immaterial soul that places them half in the immaterial realm, giving us access to concepts, ideas, abstractions in the world of the non-physical. Scientists, atheist scientists will all admit we don't even understand human consciousness or the brain. I mean, we understand some parts of it, but they don't understand it completely. If they're at all honest, they'll admit we don't even understand human consciousness, much less how AI is going to work. So that doesn't bother them at all. That doesn't inspire them with, say, an ounce of humility. I mean, seriously, you're telling me you don't even understand human consciousness, but you think you're going to go off and create computer consciousness, AI consciousness. Seriously, how can you create something by accident that you don't even understand? I mean, the first step in creating life would be to understand life, what life is. And we still don't know. Human beings can't even create a cell with life. We can't create a single amoeba and give it life. We have no understanding of consciousness, life, or any of those things. And yet we think we're going to accidentally create a small g God. That's going to be the super intelligence that's going to replace us all and go out into the universe and, make and show how great man is. Doesn't even, talk about a myth, talk about needing faith. They need more faith than any 15 any 1,000 evangelical Protestants or Catholics or anything. They accuse Christians of being faith-based, but they have more faith than anyone in their nonsense. So they should be embarrassed to believe the things they believe, but they're not. They boldly profess it. Point 11, and now some of this is kind of overlaps other points I've made. You'll see some of these do, like here. AI, as we experience it today, has many hard limits, most of which we are bumping up against. So power, electricity, chips, the various chips they use to run these LLMs, RAM memory. That's why you can't buy memory for your computer, or if you do, it's several times more than it was just a year ago. Hard drives, and data to consume. When they build these LLMs, they feed in trillions of bytes of information, of data, of writing from human beings that we've created over the past 100 years. So anything humans have written and put on the internet, it's pretty much all been taken in to these latest models. They talk about how many parameters they have. They're in the trillions now of parameters. When they make bigger and better AIs, what they do is they increase that parameter count. So it's more information brought in. So the LLM is bigger, which means it takes more memory to be loaded into. It takes more of the chips to run it and more power. And then, of course, more cooling and all those things. And, of course, it's slower. The bigger it is, the slower it is, too. So we're running up against real-world limits. I mean, how many Earth's worth of data can you consume? People say, oh, we're only in the first few years of AI. Imagine in 30 years what it's going to look like. That sounds good on paper, except how can we 10x or 100x or million x what we have now if we can't 10x or 100x or million x our data? Are we going to go back in time and scan the Library of Alexandria? Are we going to somehow create a whole nother world's worth of data? We have to create another Stack Overflow full of programming questions. We got to create another GitHub and bring in all those projects. We have to create another Twitter, another Facebook. I mean, once you've taken in all that data from online forums like Reddit's a huge one, and it's all online. I think they've blocked it now, though. But anyhow, once you've taken everything in, how do you double that, much less 10x it or 100x it? There's a limit there. We're reaching a limit. You can only build factories so fast. You can only make so many chips per year. You can only bring in so much data, and they just get too big and unwieldy and slow. So the fact that there's these limits, so this is just the hard limits they acknowledge. Then there's the philosophical limits, which I alluded to earlier, that AI can't reason, and it's non-deterministic. So it can only do certain tasks. It's only useful for certain kinds of work, and it will never be useful for other things. Humans aren't going to want to go under the knife to an AI. You're not going to want to get operated on by some AI, by some clanker, and hope it doesn't get confused. And, we've heard horror stories about what some of these self-driving cars, where they've gotten confused by certain things because they don't have reason. You can train them and put some guardrails on and maybe have two of them running, and they have to agree. Or if two of them don't agree, then they go to a third one, and it goes to a fallback mechanism. They try everything, But what they're dancing around is the fact that they don't have reason. And that's dangerous. You're putting your computer, you're putting your car, you're putting your life in the hands of some kind of a super capable toddler, it's an unprecedented thing. It's like a parrot that can talk really well. It's like it's hard to come up with an analogy because we've never had anything quite like this, but it is as dumb as a toddler, even though it can write a book, even though it can create not create, but derive a song. And I'll get to that later too. They're very derivative. Since AI lacks the use of reason, it is unable to remove one shred of entropy. And this is another fundamental thing. When it comes to coding, what's the Achilles heel of AI? It can't remove entropy. What AI does, you can give it goals. It can talk to itself and come up with a bunch of tests and make sure the tests pass. And it can call a bunch of tools on your computer that run, and it can get back the output and say, okay, that looks good. Let's move on to the next step. And let's do this and this and this. But all it keeps on doing is tacking on functions and tacking on code. It can't read the whole thing, understand it, come up with a good design based on your understanding and your training and all your years of experience, and come up with a good design for this new program. It can't do that because it doesn't have reason. So AI-generated code is always bloated, uninspired, it's derivative, because it tacks things on more and more until it reaches its goal. It can't read the whole thing, understand the big picture, recognize patterns and other abstractions, rewrite it or refactor it to be more clear or concise, because only a human with reason can do that. The universe tends toward chaos. Only a being with reason can impose order on that chaos or remove entropy. Have you ever heard the saying, I'm sorry, my dear, I didn't have time to write you a shorter letter? You ever heard that phrase? It's kind of counterintuitive. Like, what do you mean time to write a shorter letter? It would take less time. No, it takes more time to write a shorter letter, because to be concise, you have to reread it. You think about it. What words can I take out? How can I rephrase that to be more concise? It takes more effort to be concise than to be wordy. Okay. And so that's one of the truths about AI. AI is very wordy because it doesn't have reason. All AI, again, LLMs as experienced today, is the very definition, the very essence of derivative. You hear about Hollywood being derivative. All they can do is copy what's been done before. What movies have come out in the last 30 years? What great movies did we have in the 90s or the 80s? What can we redo today? That's derivative, right? We've complained about how Hollywood has lost its creativity, lost its flair, lost its touch. Everything's derivative. Everything is, it's like they can't think of anything new anymore. It all has to be derivative from something they've already done in the past and relive their glory days, as it were, and recycle that intellectual property. Well, guess what? In the world of AI, that's all it can do. Everything it does is literally derivative. It's deriving from all the stuff it's been trained on using statistical modeling, probability, and all those things I mentioned, various kinds of math. It's advanced math, but it's math. It lacks any creativity or understanding. It can't invent anything. It'll never come up with a novel idea or some great idea. See, a human could. Humans have creativity. Humans have a soul. They can think. They can think of something no one's ever thought of before. The AI will never think of something no one's thought of before because it won't be in its training data, and it can't think. It can't put two and two together and come up with some new idea. It just won't do it. It's impossible for it to do that. Of course, the only AI worth talking about or worrying about is that which exists today. That is LLMs, or large language models. This kind of goes up to one of the first points. But what I mean by that is we shouldn't worry about these. They talk about these three levels. It's kind of like they talk about in the scientism, the science religion. They talk about Kardashev type 1 civilization that can use all the energy that's on the Earth. And then a type 2 civilization can use all the energy of its host star. And then a type 3 civilization uses all the energy of its host galaxy. It's kind of a silly way to divide up. I mean, it's nonsense. We're not even in type 1. I mean, it's ridiculous. But they talk about the same thing with AI. Everything now, we're in limited, narrow AI models, these LLMs. But that's all we're ever going to have, really. We're not going to have the next level is AGI, which, as I mentioned, artificial generalized intelligence or artificial general intelligence, basically human equivalent, possibly with consciousness as well. And then the third step, they think that once we have AGI, we can spin up a bunch of these virtual human beings and say, hey, make me a better AI, and just have them on loop for day in, day out, 24/7. They're never tired. They never grumble. They don't take vacations. They work 24/7. As long as they have electricity, they're happy. And so once we get these human AIs, these AGIs, then it's going to be all over. It could take days. It could take months. It could take a few years. It could take 10 years. But inevitably will lead to ASI, or artificial superintelligence, aka small g God, where it's as far above us as Einstein is above an ant. You know, the leap from an ant to Einstein. How could the ant conceive of what Einstein could do to it? Likewise, we won't be able to conceive, much less control, what this ASI will be able to do to us. But my point with number 14 here is don't worry about it. It's never going to happen. Even AGI is not going to happen, much less, you can't, if we could create a God, we would be a God, okay? You can't create something superior to yourself. It doesn't even make sense. It's insane. It's literal insanity. And this is the role of philosophy. Philosophy has a role. I think they call it the queen of the sciences, because science comes under it. You have to have something that says, "Hey, man, you're going off the deep end. What you're looking to do can't happen." That's the role philosophy has. It's not to replace science. They each have their role. They each have their slot, as it were, in our reality. And you can't just throw out philosophy, because even if you're not a philosopher, you're still going to have a philosophy. These modern scientists have a philosophy. It's called materialism, that the material world is all that exists. Everything else can be ignored and it doesn't even exist. And that's false. So you can't believe them. Which leads to point number 15. Today's AI psychosis and insanity requires as a prerequisite the errors of evolution, the Big Bang, and materialism. As I said in, I think it was in point, it was one of the first ones. Just like a creature, like a fish can't give birth to something more than a fish. Point number 4 here. The AI can't create something better than itself. But see, if you believe in evolution, then you believe that information can come out of nowhere. And you can have this encoding of information in the DNA. How can you have new information being created just from random chance? Again, you want to be scientific? You think you're a scientist? Then show me where in science and experimentation have you ever seen information created that did not come from an intellect, from something with reason? You'll never will. Whether it's a car that was created in the mind of man who has reason, or the things God created. God has more than reason. That's the only time. Unless you have the faculty of reason, you cannot impose order on chaos. You cannot create information. So if you believe that a Big Bang can explode and then have this orderly universe just happen, or new information can just be created over the millions of years, creating countless different species that inhabit our realm, unless you believe those things, you're never going to fall for similar nonsense about AI. But as we know, AI's evolution, godless, materialistic, Darwinian macro evolution is believed by about 99% of professors and PhDs. Of course, as it was also pointed out, about 99% of classrooms only teach the aforementioned godless evolution. So why are people all believing in evolution? Because that's what they're taught. They're not taught both. They're not given both sides and letting them choose. Oh no, they're only taught one as being reasonable, and they're not even given the other as a possibility. Never mind the fact that that creation is much more reasonable, and there's a lot of evidence that disproves evolution. But that's a whole topic for a whole different podcast. So that basically sums up what I wanted to say today about AI. Of course, being a software developer myself, I am actually creating some software along those lines. I'm working on an AI chatbot for CathInfo that where you can select different models, different libraries of information, and you'll be able to log in and look at your old chats and everything. And it's going to be a whole website sort of. It'll be hosted on CathInfo. It'll be like CathInfo/AI. Now, it's not ready yet. I'm still working on it, and I don't know when it's going to be done. But I do believe it's important to have local models, even if they're a bit smaller. I think you can do a lot with local models, and I like being able to own what I have, and not have to depend on some cloud model. Because I also believe, I was mentioning that there's this bubble. Well, when that bubble pops, right now, AI is much cheaper than it should be. They are not pricing it enough to pay for the cost of making it, the cost to serve it up to you, plus a small profit. No, they're not. They are subsidizing it, and they're banking on the future. They're hoping to capture a bunch of market share, and they'll worry about being profitable later. Just like happened in the dot-com bubble. You had a bunch of companies, they threw a .com on it, and all of a sudden it was worth 10 times as much on the stock market. I mean, there were companies that just added a .com, and they went way up in value and made a bunch of money on the stock market. It was insanity. It couldn't last forever, and it didn't last forever, because eventually people are like, when are we going to get some money for all this? We spent how many $1 trillion over the past 5 years, and how much are you making yet? And eventually they're going to lose patience, and then something's going to happen, and the whole thing's just going to collapse. And who knows what's going to collapse with it? It could be very ugly. But all we need to know for sure is these 15 points that I gave you about AI, these are all true, and these are things that we sane people, especially if you're Catholic and a traditional Catholic, these are the things we have to keep in mind and remember when it comes to AI or LLMs today. Because while they're useful, they also have some strong limits. And AI as it exists today is on shaky ground. They're way overbuilding, and something's got to give. I mean, if you look into the numbers, they can't deliver what they're promising, what they're hoping for, and what they're banking on almost physically can't come to pass. So that leads to the inevitability of some kind of a collapse or a bursting of a bubble. So here on CathInfo, I'm going to have an AI that we'll always be able to use. I'm not depending on any third-party service. Doesn't matter how much they raise their price, how much they introduce, mandatory logins or mandatory advertising or whatever. However they restrict access to what they have, because you might not be able to get what you have today for as cheap as you have today. It might be much more expensive in a few years. And so I'm going to have some right here on the property, and it's going to be set up with a bunch of pre-Vatican II literature, PDFs, text files and whatnot. And you'll be able to ask questions and use not just those kind of AIs, but also just plain ones, open source ones. You can try out different ones, ask them questions right here on my own hardware. So you'll be independent of these large companies who also take your data and do who knows what with it. When you put in a chat to my system, it's only going to be on my server. And frankly, I'm much more trustworthy than Elon Musk or Sam Altman or Dario, these guys that run these big AI companies. I mean, I think we can agree on that. You can trust a traditional Catholic more than you can trust those guys. So if you're interested in helping the cause, you can go to CathInfo. I have information there on how you can donate, to help buy the equipment I'll need and so forth. I just recently bought an upgraded video card, a very powerful one. It's called a 3090. They cost about $1,200. Most of that I had to shell out for, because I need to be able to develop on this. I need something that can quickly crunch through these books to create these databases, these vector databases that are used for the systems I'm putting forward. And so I didn't want to have to get into building these and be hampered by slow hardware. So I just took the hit. I got one donation toward it. So about 1,000 of it I had to come up with myself for this last video card. So I would appreciate some donations toward it if you can spare it. But right now it's working great. I still have that transcriber on CathInfo. It works very fast when it uses that new card. It takes about a third to a quarter as long to crank to process the whole video into text. So exciting things continue to happen. I'll keep you apprised, but feel free to share this with others you know who might not understand what's going on with AI, what its limits are, what its capabilities are, what it is. Share it with your friends, like and subscribe to this channel, and post it on anywhere else you attend. Any forums, social media. Just share the good news, because there's not very many people who know about this podcast. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.